Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a river, wide, gray, and cold, running through marshland so thick you can barely walk through it. No bridges, no roads, no buildings, nothing but fog and mud and silence. That was this place 2,000 years ago. That river is the Thames, and that silence is where 10 million people now live, work, and breathe every single day. This is London, and this is everything that happened here. In the year 43 AD, something arrived on the shores of Britain that would change this island forever. 4 Roman legions, 40,000 soldiers, under the command of General Aulus Plautius, acting on the orders of Emperor Claudius, a man who desperately needed a military victory to secure his grip on power back in Rome. They crossed the Thames, they built a bridge, and on the northern bank, they planted a flag and started building. They called it Londinium. Within a single generation, a muddy river crossing became one of the most extraordinary cities in the empire. A forum, a basilica, a governor's palace, temples, bathhouses, merchants from Gaul, Spain, North Africa, soldiers from Syria and Germany. At its peak, 60,000 souls. But London's first great catastrophe came early, and it came with fire. Her name was Boudicca, queen of the Iceni tribe. The Romans had made a catastrophic mistake. They seized her lands, flogged her publicly, and assaulted her daughters. Her response was not a rebellion. It was a reckoning. Boudicca burned Londinium to the ground. Archaeologists today can still find a layer of burned red clay beneath modern London streets, half a meter thick, lying under office buildings and coffee shops 2,000 years later. Rome rebuilt, this time in stone, massive walls. Then, in 410 AD, the empire sent a message that felt like the ground disappearing. You are on your own. The legions withdrew. Londinium was silent, empty. The greatest city in Britannia simply stopped. 200 years of near silence followed the Roman withdrawal. The Anglo-Saxons built their own settlement just to the west, Lundenwic, the London trading place. For 2 centuries it grew quietly. And then, out of the North Sea, came the most feared warriors of the medieval world, the Vikings. In 842 AD, Danish raiders sacked Lundenwic and left it burning. In 851, a Viking army of 350 ships tore through the town. It wasn't a raid anymore, it was an occupation. Then came Alfred, the one Anglo-Saxon king who refused to break. He fought the Vikings to a standstill, and in 886 he recaptured London and made a decision of extraordinary genius. He moved the city back inside the old Roman walls. Those ancient stone defenses, built 800 years earlier by a civilization that no longer existed, were suddenly the most valuable real estate in England. London, reborn as Lundenburg, became the beating heart of Anglo-Saxon England. But the Viking shadow never truly lifted. King Canute ruled an empire from the Thames, stretching across the entire North Sea. And then came a year that cracked history in two, 1066. On the 14th of October 1066, at the Battle of Hastings, King Harold II made his last stand. By nightfall, he was dead. The Anglo-Saxon age was over. William marched on London. The city surrendered. And on Christmas Day, inside Westminster Abbey, William the Conqueror was crowned King of England. He didn't destroy London, he dominated it. Within months, construction began on the most feared fortress in England, the Tower of London. Its message to every Londoner who looked at it was unmistakable. "I am here. I am permanent. Do not even think about it." Medieval London grew fast and grew chaotic. By the 1200s, the population was pushing toward 80,000. The streets were narrow rivers of mud and worse. Pigs roamed freely. And yet this filthy, chaotic city was building some of the most ambitious structures in the medieval world. Old St. Paul's Cathedral, London Bridge, rebuilt in stone in 1209, covered with houses, shops, a chapel, and the severed heads of traitors mounted on spikes. Then, from the ports of Europe, came something that would bring the city to its knees: the Black Death. In a single year, 1348 to 1349, somewhere between a third and half of London's entire population died. Bodies piled up faster than they could be buried. Mass graves dug outside the city walls. The city survived. It always survived. But it would take generations to recover. The Tudor dynasty came to power in 1485, and when Henry VIII took the throne in 1509, young, brilliant, and utterly ruthless, London held its breath. He would rule for 38 years. He would have 6 wives. He would execute 2 of them. And he would dissolve every monastery in England, seizing wealth accumulated over 5 centuries and turning it into his own. It was an act of breathtaking destruction, and it made Henry the richest king England had ever seen. Under Elizabeth I, London truly became a world city. Population passed 200,000. English ships sailing to the Americas, Africa, India. The East India Company laying the foundations of empire. And in the theaters of this exploding electric city, a glover's son from Stratford-upon-Avon arrived and began to write. His name was William Shakespeare. At the Globe Theatre, a wooden circle on the South Bank holding 3,000 people from every class, he gave the world Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear, and Othello, works that captured every human emotion so perfectly that 400 years later, we still haven't found anyone who does it better. The 5th of November, 1605. Beneath the Houses of Parliament, in a cellar rented under a false name, a man named Guy Fawkes sat surrounded by 36 barrels of gunpowder. They were caught. Fawkes was tortured in the Tower of London. His co-conspirators were executed. But the gunpowder plot became part of London's DNA, burned into the national memory every November 5th. Then came civil war. London backed Parliament. And in January 1649, in front of the banqueting house in Whitehall, King Charles I of England was publicly beheaded. A king, executed by his own people, in the street. In 1665, the Great Plague killed 100,000 Londoners, a quarter of the city. And then, barely a year later, on the 2nd of September 1666, in a baker's shop on a street called Pudding Lane, a fire started. In 4 days, it consumed the city. 13,000 houses, 87 churches. The old St. Paul's Cathedral cracked, crumbled, and fell. The medieval city that had existed for 500 years was gone. But from the ashes came Christopher Wren's masterpiece, the new St. Paul's Cathedral. Its great dome, still standing today, rose over the scorched city like a promise. By 1800, London was the largest city on Earth. 1 million people, growing faster than any city in history. The Bank of England had made it the financial capital of the world. The Port of London handled more trade than any port on the planet. Goods from India, the Caribbean, China, Africa, all flowing through one city on a gray river in northern Europe. London was the capital of the world. But there was another London. In the East End, in Whitechapel and Bethnal Green, hundreds of thousands lived in conditions that would shock us today. 12 people in a single room, children working 14 hours a day. Life expectancy in some slums under 30 years. This was the London that Charles Dickens wrote about, with fury and precision so sharp it still cuts. Victorian London built the world's first underground railway in 1863. Tower Bridge in 1894. The great sewer system under its streets. It built everything. And in 1888, in its foggy alleyways, it became home to history's most enduring, unsolved mystery. Jack the Ripper. Never caught, never identified, still obsessing the world today. The 20th century opened with London at the peak of its power. The largest empire in human history. The financial capital of the world. Within 15 years, it would be shattered. The First World War killed London's sons by the hundreds of thousands in the mud of France and Belgium. The memorials across the city still bear their names. But it was the Second World War that would test London's soul, in a way nothing in its 2,000-year history had prepared it for. On the 7th of September 1940, 348 German bombers flew up the Thames and dropped their payloads on London. It was the beginning of the Blitz, 57 consecutive nights of bombing. And yet, London did not break. Londoners slept on underground platforms wrapped in blankets, kept shops open in bombed buildings with signs reading "more open than usual." King George VI and Queen Elizabeth refused to leave Buckingham Palace, even after it was bombed 9 times. And then there was the photograph, St. Paul's Cathedral, standing intact above a sea of smoke and fire, its great dome rising above the destruction like a declaration. London will endure. The war ended on the 8th of May, 1945. VIII Day. London erupted. The empire was finished. The treasury was empty. Half the city was rubble. But London was alive. London rebuilt. Not just its buildings, its identity. Over the following decades, people came from the Caribbean, from India and Pakistan, from West Africa, from Hong Kong, from Poland, from everywhere. London became something it had never quite been before. Not just a city where the world's goods passed through, but a city where the world's people settled and made it their own. The Notting Hill Carnival, the swinging 60s, punk rock, the financial Big Bang, Canary Wharf rising from derelict Dockland into a forest of glass. Today, London is home to nearly 9 million people speaking over 300 languages. A city where you can walk from a Roman wall to a glass skyscraper in 5 minutes. Where a Viking street name sits next to a Bangladeshi restaurant, next to a Norman church, next to a Victorian pub. 2,000 years of history, layered on top of each other, all present at once. London has been burned 5 times, plagued twice, bombed for 57 consecutive nights. It has lost its empire. It has reinvented itself so many times that no single description of it was ever true for very long. And still it stands,